So welcome. I appreciate all of you who are here in person coming to this town hall on the new School of Social Work building, and appreciate those of you who are online to listen into and to be part of the conversation about our new building. As I am learning much from our architects and engineers and folks that I'm working with, the building is very much a process and it takes time and a lot of conversations and a lot of input, and so I appreciate that you're here. Because that's definitely something we want to do. So the purpose of today is to give you a little bit of an update, very little bit of talking, and then to open it up for questions or comments or anything that you all want to know. And we're going to be reminding you frequently, the survey is still open till the beginning of February so next week or so. Please fill it out because that's one way to provide input and talk to your colleagues to do the same. And there's also volunteer opportunities to get involved, to participate and have even greater input into some of the specific areas within the new building, like the faculty and staff offices and spaces, the student spaces, we call them specialty spaces, along with any other open, larger group spaces. So I want to introduce to you some of my colleagues here who are with the university and the system, and I've been working closely with them since day one. So first up is Anna Borgerding. Got it, okay. And she'll talk more about herself and what she's doing. And then there's Mike Dougherty on the end. Great folks to be working with on this building, and appreciate their efforts. We do have a committee that's been working with the building committee in general. It used to be Mike Woolley was representing the faculty. He has stepped down, and instead our own Dr. Paul Sacco is representing the school. So you can talk to him if you have questions. Love the answers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here and being engaged and part of this process. We're going to talk a little bit about the project details. So like Dean Postmus had said, the planning for this building started in 2015 and maybe even a little bit earlier. We went through the capital planning process through the state. So the building is funded through the state, so not UMB funds, but through the state capital planning process. And that's a long process that we go through. We're currently in design right now, and we expect groundbreaking hopefully this fall. And it'll take about 3 years to construct, and so we hope to occupy the building by the fall of 2027. A little bit about the budget. It's a $121 million budget for the building. That includes design and construction.
And furniture. And computers.
And AV, anything in the building that we would need. So you don't have to bring your old desk to the new facility. So. As the dean had said, there's a survey, so I know we're going to post up the QR code for those, and there's different ways for you to get involved throughout this process, and we encourage you to do so. Your feedback is very valuable to us. So the survey will be open. There's ways to sign up for a committee. Please also share with those who are not able to be here today or to join us. And we look at all of those responses. I think we have over 100 now so far, but we look into all the feedback that helps shape this building, and we want to make sure that we're able to use that throughout the design process. Mike, do you want to say anything about that?
Hi, I'm Mike Dougherty. I'm the capital project manager for design and construction here at UMB. I think one of the biggest places that there's a chance for input, so I should explain my role. So I manage the design team and the construction team, and so I'm the interface for the university between Judy and her team and all of you and the design and construction team, ensuring that there's proper connections in all of those interactions. The volunteer portion that we just showed the QR code for, that we have 4 committees that were mentioned, the spaces that the dean was referring to. So we have design meetings every other Tuesday, and so the last Tuesday of the next 3 months are set up to be meetings for those committees to give direct input and interact with the design team and the construction managers, face-to-face, one-on-one, to help shape those spaces. So again, just want to encourage the volunteer spirit in everyone to kind of get on that list and join those committees if possible.
Well, I'm going to share a little bit about the location. So for those of you who may not know, and we have a map, I think that Alex is going to share too. The first map is like of our campus map, and you'll be able to see how parking is located very close by. There's 3 garages. So the site for the new building is right next to Lexington, the administrative building. You might see a fence there, and I believe we have some pollinator garden there. There's a sign there for that. And there's parking available in the Saratoga garage or the Lexington garage close by, or Pearl. It's also on that straight thoroughfare, Lexington Street there. So that's the location. And Alex, if you'll share the next slide, which shows a little bit about the site there as well. So that parking lot, that administrative lot, won't be there. You might see the shuttles parking there currently, but those won't be there in the future. So at this time, we'd like to open it up for any questions in the audience here or online. Thank you for monitoring the online portion if you have questions about the project or any details.
Taylor?
Hi there, good morning, good afternoon. So I have 2 student questions, and I'm advocating for students, but I always want students to be able to have their own voice and work with SGA. One about student parking. Will Lexington and Saratoga, will student parking be offered in that space?
That's a great question. So I am not the parking expert, but however, we will work with our parking colleagues. And I believe that there's student parking currently in Lexington. And so I believe that there's no plans that I'm aware of that will change. So I believe that would be still available to the students, yes.
And would we be able, and I can follow up with another person, but would our school of social work students get priority in that Lexington, because they have evening classes and whatnot? Would they get priority for that Lexington student parking space?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how the student parking is allocated out across campus. So we can get back to you though. Did you write that down, Mike? Okay, perfect. So we can get back to you, Taylor, about that specific. I will say that Mike and I are meeting with the School of Social Work SGA on Monday. So we are hoping, and I'll hope to have an answer for that question by Monday. We also met with the USGA in December to help share the details about the project, student input. For those of you who don't know, my background is in student affairs. I started at the campus center, so it's really important to get their input and want to hear their voices as well as part of this project. So I appreciate you speaking. And you said you had another
Two more quick questions. Also with student spaces, making sure like lactation rooms and kitchens and I'm sure this is all, but like things evolve quickly, right? We're even looking, the laptop that I had 5 years ago is antiquated. So how is this being kept up with the latest and greatest? We're looking at, I think it was a 10-year kind of plan. Like how does that evolve for student spaces? AI, hopefully at that point, will be something that we're using, and what kind of resources will students be offered? You were talking about having computers and whatnot. What does that mean for them?
So there's a few things that you mentioned, lactation spaces, prayer or spiritual space, and so as part of the survey, there are ways in which you can provide your feedback. And I just looked at it actually a couple of days ago about the feedback, and we specifically asked about lactation resources in that space and in the spiritual space as well. Those spaces are being currently designed and planned for the building, and including shower spaces as well as some other amenities. And that's one of the subcommittees that Mike has asked, for volunteers to help. There are, the technology needs and how does that evolve. This just came up in that there's all kinds of things that are evolving in regards to that, and we want to be as flexible. And that's one of the things that Dean Postmus has really shared in those meetings. And so we look at what we currently have in the infrastructure, and then how do we create that flexibility or build that into the rooms, either those conference rooms, the teaching classrooms, and things like that. So, Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Just to reemphasize the committees, the best way is to be in the weeds with us in meetings while we're creating these spaces and really defining the parameters. We have a document that defines what we're supposed to build for the state, but sometimes it doesn't get as specific as we need it to be. So that input from all the different groups that make up the community and the school we need that.
We also have other student spaces that we're paying close attention to, including a library. I think somebody wanted a library in the back a long time ago. I think Najma asked for one. And space for students to congregate. There'll be a kitchen area, things for them to, and refrigerators, all those things. And we're paying attention to where the classrooms are located to make sure that the students aren't relegated to one place, but that they're actually going to be throughout the building and have opportunities to interact with all of us who are there. But yes, being involved in those things. You have another
And
question?
then one quick question, and then
Okay,
I'll stop talking.
I was asked, anybody who's asking a question, please speak loudly so that those who are online can hear.
Okay, and the last question is student affairs, and there's a couple of us that are underneath that. We need privacy when we talk with our students, and we really value the students' privacy, but we also need security. And you know, how is that being measured? Right now, it takes 3 minutes for a panic button to get to security, and a lot can happen in 3 minutes. So what is being done to facilitate that, you know, for the team?
So we had our first design meeting yesterday, actually, with the police department, and we began that very conversation. So that there'll be a series of those meetings on that subject as well. So.
Thank you.
And it's hard to balance,
Yeah.
right? You want people to feel like welcome and involved and there, but you also want us to feel safe. And we don't want it to be a bunker. So it's this, how do we do that? And the good news is the police department is closer. They're literally going to be around the corner. I think I saw Becky had a hand up.
Yeah, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the committees, the volunteer committees, sort of what those are. I remember on the survey, I'm not sure if they had a lot of information, but just maybe if you could give a highlight.
So there's the All Access Spaces Committee, so that includes lobbies, what we call huddle rooms, which are unassigned offices essentially for small meetings or study. There's also, we need input on the exterior spaces because we do have an elevated occupiable roof garden that we'd like to get student and faculty and staff input on, as well as the configuration of something as practical as the toilet rooms and how they function and work and are safe and inviting. So that's one committee. The next committee is the faculty and staff committee. So there we're mostly talking about the configuration of offices, furnishings in those offices, conference rooms, the technology associated with those, and obviously teacher input on the classrooms as well. And then the student committee focuses more on those social spaces, the student lounges, the student kitchenettes. Faculty also have lounges as well, and their input on the classrooms as well, right? Because the student experience is really the point of the classroom. And then the last one is, as was mentioned earlier, the specialty spaces. So we have a lactation room, obviously has some privacy concerns associated. Where is it positioned? What's the best space for it and location within the building? Because we've gone to great lengths to try to sprinkle these amenities throughout the building so that it's not segregated, so students don't feel sequestered from the staff or the faculty. Then there's the prayer room was mentioned, that we only have 1 or 2 on campus, and so we really need to revisit that and get proper input from all concerned. And then we also have bike storage and shower was mentioned. So, and there's a couple other little smaller spaces that are escaping me at this second, but that's what those committees are.
Yes, Alex.
All right, we do have some questions from the virtual audience, 2 anonymous questions. One is, will there be illumination from the garages to the school so people here late at night will feel safe? And the other anonymous attendee writes, what are the current plans for workspaces for staff members? I have sensory issues and currently work in an open area with non-adjustable fluorescent lighting and heat, which gives me migraines. So those are 2 questions for you from the virtual audience.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So the first one is about lighting. The campus has been facilities specifically has been working with our police department and working on increasing the lighting across campus. We just completed a project to transition all of our outdoor lights to LED and to the vibrancy and into the outdoor spaces. Some of those lights are on the building and some of those are light poles around. So this building will also be illuminated at light, as well as those pathways to the garages or around for the safe traversing of our campus. Additionally, this building and this site is still on our campus, and so we'll be part of our regular patrols through the police department and our security officers, as well as our police officers as well. So we don't have detailed plans right now about what the illumination is around that site, but I can guarantee you, if any of you drive by HSF3, you know that at night there's lights all around it and inside of the building as well to ensure that it's lit up for safety.
And we talked with the police department about cameras and how to use them not in a way that is a balance between privacy and safety. And so we talked about outside cameras so we can see things as well.
Yeah, and one of the most safe things in a city is obviously people on the street, right? So if you noticed in the map slide that the Maryland Department of Health is scheduled to move into the old Social Security building, if you know that building, Metro West, with a significant size department, we're told in excess of 2,500 people, they are scheduled, we don't run their project, but they are scheduled to move in prior to our building opening. So there'll be a lot more foot traffic down Green and across Lexington to go to Lexington Market. So we expect the area to continue to improve long before we move in.
And then the second question, Alex, can you repeat that?
The second question had to do with the workspaces for staff members. The member of the audience writes, I have sensory issues and currently work in an open area with non-adjustable fluorescent lighting and heat, which gives me migraines.
I understand. So throughout the design process, through this summer, we engaged with over 18 different parts and areas, departments within the School of Social Work to identify the different types of workstations and office spaces needed. As we get through the design of this, the lighting controls will be part of that. Not every area will have adjustable light. There are common spaces and whatnot, but that is definitely something that we will look into as far as different areas. And a lot of areas are going to be sharing natural light, which we are hoping to have most people experience throughout the building who are working in the building, and that's one of the best ways to have a better natural light versus the overhead fluorescent or LED.
And all the meetings that Anna talked about, all the different units around the school that they've met with the design team over the summer, and they said, this is how many offices, this is the shared spaces, this is, and for the most part, as far as I know, all the square footage that was asked for, it was granted, is included. So, talk to whoever was the one meeting, you probably met with the team, and so there's a variety of folks around our school who provided input on what they actually need. And assuming that they have talked to those folks, and so I think, again, that we're looking at office space that is the same size for all faculty and staff, to make it, again, that there's no one office that might be better. The only offices that will be bigger will be the deans and associate deans, but beyond that, it will, and otherwise it'll be pretty much the same size. So Darren has a hand raised.
Yeah, I have two questions, one actually related to classrooms and another one related to sort of faculty and measurement. So the first question, so you had mentioned classrooms, and how classrooms, how many, and I guess my question is, how is this being envisioned with the rise of online education? I mean, more and more our students are requesting online classes, and so the idea that we would need all of these spaces for students to congregate to have food, I'm just curious how that's being balanced with like the reality of like actual education and what that looks like, and the fear that we spend all this money on a building and you have only 30% of the student body who ever uses it because they're taking classes online. So I guess I'm just curious about like the reality of classrooms and classroom space with like what is actually the trend in higher education. So that's my first question.
So I'm going to start. You raised a really good question because we're predicting, right? And we don't even know as far as classes are concerned and student size, student body size. We don't even know as far as even the future of work when it comes to, are we all going to be back in the offices, or are we going to be, there's so many things that we don't know, that COVID has changed the landscape. And so we're trying, my premise and what I've been telling the design team is whatever we do, we have to be flexible. The space has to be flexible so we can pivot if we need something different. And so that would include, do we pivot and have greater technology in the room, the classrooms, to be able to do different types of teaching? We shrunk the number of classrooms. We worked closely with Justin going, well, how many classrooms are we using now? And how do we want to, what do we need in the new space? And so looking at that, we're also looking to ensure that classrooms are flexible enough even within the classroom. We're looking at high media classrooms where there are, imagine walking into a room, the professor's at the front or in the middle of the room, and there's tables along the side with monitors with groups of 4 or 5 students, and monitors that they can see everything and working with the professor and along with doing their own thing. So there's lots of ideas that we're using, and we are going and looking at other universities and what are they doing, and so we are paying attention to all of those issues as much as we can with, again, it's a prediction of what's out there.
I would also just like to add too, we say classroom, right, that everyone thinks of a certain thing, but we have a lot of spaces that can be used for a lot of different things, whether that's trainings or, think about Lexington building is right next door and HR is in there and they might have a need for space or, right, or, you have programs that run at night, and so how are we using the assembly space that's going to be in the new building, and also our classrooms, right, for other areas or programs. My hope is that there's more collaboration too, and I think that's part of school social work, and so what does that look like, right? And making sure that we have enough space so that we're not building a building that's too small, so.
If I could add. So there is an assembly space in the building that will be able to accommodate an entire school assembly, which is, we don't have that capability right now in this building. That space, though, is also subdividable into 3 smaller spaces so that we have flexibility like that elsewhere. There's another conference room that we can expand into being 2 and split in half. We also modularized, so offices and huddle rooms are typically 100 square feet. Then the next size is 200 for a small conference room, 300 for a large conference room, so that things can be subdivided later if that's necessary as well. But we share your concern, especially on behalf of the state and the taxpayers, right? We don't want to overbuild. So that one of the other things we did is we validated the program. So the program document was approved quite some years ago. It was finally funded about 4 years ago, and now we're acting on it, right? And it's our, Anna and I's obligation to build what the state approved. Your legislatures voted yes for that budget, right? So in doing that, the first step we did is, as Judy mentioned, so we sat down with all the department heads and we went back through every single room and space and really challenged them that very question. And I think it's an open question for a lot of people in the community and throughout the world, really. Well, a lot of them came back and said, we don't quite need that much space. And we actually did reduce the overall square footage, a small percentage, but we still did it. And so at this point, there's also the hope that other units will use the building for the assembly space, for the elevated outdoor space, for other uses from other departments. So our hope is all of those, all of the above, but as Judy said, none of us really know yet. That make sense?
Yeah, and so then my second one is actually a comment. So as someone who came from a school who recently did a renovation, and the idea of classroom being close to like faculty office is great in theory. It is an acoustic nightmare. So I will just tell you firsthand that it is really challenging to be in your office during passing times of classes. So I love students. I like working with students. I love my job. I also understand when that is actually put in place, it is not as great in practicality because you end up being absorbed in that when you are in your office trying to do something else that's not teaching. So I just wanted to caution you that is, in theory, nice, in practicality, I've lived through it and not so nice.
Thank you for that, appreciate that.
And we have taken that into consideration. So the offices, while they're on the same floor as student classrooms, the student classrooms are all going to be, we're calling them the tower classrooms, are all going to be in the same space within the building. and then the offices will be further behind, and so not right next to. So, yes, we're aware of, and even paying attention to the security of the offices, and the security of research that's being done, and I mean, all of those things we're looking at, but especially the acoustic thing, I think is an important piece as well. And that would even mean, as we think about the actual classroom space, what's the acoustics like within that space? And so, paying attention to that is also going to be a crucial part of when we get into the nitty-gritty of the space.
I think we had a question over here, yes.
I just had a kind of a follow-up question. I think it was mentioned that many departments and teams have met with people on this team to talk about their needs. And I just wanted to confirm, one, that those needs were all captured and there will be some follow-up before the final design of the interior building has been completed. Because I know my team, I met about the needs of my team, but I don't know if that information is still being utilized, and then what's the follow-up to say, hey, this is what we heard you say you needed, and this is how we're accommodating you, or we've made changes to that.
So I think I remember meeting you as well. Nice to see you again. I believe we definitely had 2. We might have even had 3 with some people, and we just kind of validated the list. We have not validated the actual floor plans yet because they're really not quite finished yet. And then they'll become, a lot of these spaces, respectfully, are very similar, right? It's a suite of offices, or maybe it's not even a suite, it's just a group of offices, or open space, or access. There's going to be an assignment process that I'm sure Justin is going to contribute a great deal to. So for once we pin down where we think everyone goes, and then once we do that, then we can absolutely sit down and have that final check.
All right, we have a number of online questions that are coming in. Let's bring in Alan Shugart. Alan, I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead, open your mic and ask your question.
Good afternoon. My question was basically, have you looked at other buildings, other schools' buildings, to see their best practices and any concerns that they have?
I mean, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So before we even did some of this work, several of us went, for example, to College Park, and we looked at some of their buildings there. I know that the design team has gone, where have you all gone? You went to Princeton?
We went to Princeton, we went to the American Geophysical Union in DC, which is not an educational building, and then we also went to Shady Grove. The design team themselves were selected for their higher education experience because they work around the community. They were the design team that designed the interdisciplinary life sciences building recently at UMBC. They're very versed in the latest trends. They have a team of planners who just watch office and educational trends in space planning. They've also worked closely with, I think it was Hunter College School of Social Work, in reevaluating their building that they just built. So we have reached out and are keeping an eye out on the current trends, if that helps you answer your question.
And I would just like to add, Alan, we also go through lessons learned on our own campus, right? We have built, HSF3 or even just done some large renovations, and what are some things that we have learned from there to incorporate into this project. And so we also took some small group discussions in December with the School of Social Work, and heard some of those things as well in regards to AV in rooms, and usability and accessibility as well, and so provided that to the design team.
I'll just give one more. This is an anonymous attendee who writes, is there a plan to have a space or wall designated where we can remember former SSW faculty and staff who are deceased? Many other buildings have a brass, sort of artistic tree, or where individuals can pay for a leaf, for instance, with a faculty or staff member's name, dates when they worked. We've asked about that in the past. There's a very large amount that must be donated to have an engraved plate posted. The goal would be to have an option to remember all faculty and staff who passed, rather than looking at this as a fundraising opportunity.
So I will say that as part of the project, there was an art portion as part of the project that Mike will be leading, and so that's also another way that we can get involvement from the school and from individuals. And there's going to be lots of opportunity. When we open a building, they're often a blank slate, and so there's really lots of different opportunities, and you can make it your own. And we encourage you to do so. And so during the design process, we might look into ways and areas, certain walls or feature areas as you walk into the building for that. But I also know Mike wants to talk about the art process.
So the federal government has a program that's fairly famous called 1% for Art. That's with all major construction projects. They dedicate 1% of the budget for public art. In the state of Maryland, we're pleased to have 0.5% for art. So we have a fairly significant budget to solicit the artistic community in general for a proposal that can be integrated either physically, literally into the structure of the building, or placed in different places based on the process of coming up with the proposal that are reviewed and submitted. So the Maryland State Arts Council runs that process. I sit on the committee, but I'm just one. We will certainly have a social work member, potentially, I guess it's up to Judy, maybe a student body member. We haven't even started that, right? Because we don't need to install the art until 27, right? So we got to get the rest of the things going first, but it's a very good opportunity for remembrance and for expression.
Just on that note, we have a lot of really talented artists in our social work community, and we've done some art initiatives. So I don't know how this process works, but it would be really great if we could either limit it to artists that are part of the community, or maybe give some bonus points to artists who, but at least really encourage artists who are part of the community to participate in whatever process.
So typically it's a very formal procurement process open to all the citizens of the state because it's state taxpayers' dollars. But it may be possible to carve a portion of it out to maybe sort of, if you will, crowdsource some elements throughout the building. So I think that's a great idea.
I've also noticed there's artwork throughout the current school, and would want to make sure that we find a place for that in the new school, or how appropriate, since it definitely creates a vibrant office environment.
Hi, I am an interested party. I work at school pharmacy, and two quick questions. Will there be any effort to creating a LEED building? And the second question, not as fine, I guess it's a yes. What will happen with this space? Current school?
Yes, so by state requirements, the building has to be LEED silver or greater, and really LEED silver is like the bare rank minimum. We're going for fossil fuel free.
Could you describe what LEED is?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design.
Thank you.
It's a certification program that began 20 years ago. That was a voluntary, you voluntarily joined it to almost sort of brag about the fact that you try to be as sustainable as possible, because it ends with a different rating. So there's LEED green, LEED silver, LEED gold, LEED platinum. Those initiatives were so popular and so good for the world that all of the various jurisdictions have adopted that into the building code. So that's why Anna is saying that that's kind of the minimum. So on this project, because of our president's request, we actually built into the proposals the aspiration to potentially achieve what's called net zero. That's where you do not take any energy from, you don't use any fossil fuels, and you're not burning any fossil fuels in the operation of the building. So any energy you need to run the building in a calendar year is either produced on site or bought through an electricity credit where they know the electricity has not come from a fossil fuel burning plant. So we're on track right now, and it's an aspiration. It remains as we stand here, right? Because we have a budget to maintain, but we are close and on track to achieve, as Anna just said, fossil fuel free building. It will certainly, because it'll be the latest building built here at UMB, it'll be the most efficient building on campus for sure.
And a big part of that is also a high performance envelope. So actually the most sustainable part of a building is the envelopes.
And what's an envelope?
Yes, so that is.
We're in a lot of terms.
The outside walls, roof, and underslab.
So whatever air we're heating and cooling is making sure that the air is staying in, right? And so making sure that that envelope is creating that environment that, you know, is sustainable and it's being kept in that building so that the equipment that we're using isn't overrunning or oversized. So to answer your question, yes, we have sustainability goals and it's throughout the whole, you know, part of the design process.
It's also a value of the School of Social Work in the sense that we do believe in environmental justice. And so we know that the impact it's having on communities, and so we're paying attention not just for the net zero and being environmentally friendly, but we're also looking at spaces that community folks can use, green spaces, so that they have opportunities to, in an urban area where there's hardly any, to make sure that we have space for them as well.
And then you asked about the current School of Social Work. So we will continue to maintain this building until we receive occupancy for the new building. And we are in discussion with the hospital to purchase this property. But that is yet to be determined, but we'll continue to maintain it as we have individuals in there. So.
Two questions. One is pretty quick. Will there be green spaces inside the building, like green walls or things like that? That just is so nice. The other question is I've heard different things about whether or not we'll have a simulation lab, and I wonder if there's clarification on that.
Yes. Both.
Done.
So we are, and that might be spaces along that the committees can also provide input as far as what they look like. So we have, I talked about the high-tech classrooms, and we're looking at 2 of those type of classrooms, but we're also looking at, what do we call them? We're calling them
Media labs?
well, we have media labs, which would be places that
Health lab.
and there's media labs where you can go and like produce your own material, you know, your videos, whatever, both a little different than what we have here in the sense that it will be self-done. So we don't need, you know, have a staff person walk you through, but the equipment will be there. We saw that at College Park. But we'll also have simulation rooms. We talked about, where's Justin? So we talked about what, 3 rooms or 2 rooms?
One room that's modular that has 3 settings.
So one larger room that has 3 different settings for students to potentially, depending on, you know, one might be a house, a living room kind of setting, one might be an office type of setting, again, to provide opportunities for students to do some simulation.
Thank you.
Alex?
We have 2 questions that are sort of different sides of the same issue. One person writes, regarding building access and space allocation, our group periodically hosts outside groups for trainings and meetings. How will that be handled in the new building? And another person writes, how large and what capabilities are we going to have in the new auditorium? We're thinking about meetings and events.
Yeah, so as Mike had mentioned yesterday, our first meeting with our police chief and his team and emergency management, we talked about security and which areas, and we know that there will be public groups or trainings being hosted in the building, and how do we maintain access, you know, whether that's at night or different areas. So we're looking at that right now, and it's no different from some of our other buildings too on campus, to the library, for instance, is open to the public with an ID, you know, so we have other areas. So we're currently going through that. What is the need for security, area by area, but also floor by floor as well. We know that the areas that are the largest, we wanted to put the lower parts of the building, right, so easier access. And I'll let Mike speak to the assembly space and the functionality.
Yeah, so the assembly space is large enough, as I mentioned, for an entire school assembly. So the occupancy, I believe, Justin left me, but I think we were talking, it's going up and down. That's the only reason I'm looking around. I think it's upwards of 500, and is subdividable into thirds for different sized events and different sized teaching elements. So if training was happening, we kind of have been approaching training as teaching, right? Because that's essentially what it is. And so there are 2 classrooms, 2 media labs at the lowest level, which is you enter at grade, and then at the next level, which you enter from Green Street, which is also at that grade because there's a big elevation difference between Green Street and Pearl Street, if you know the area. On that level is where the assembly space is. So all of those spaces would be easily accessible and schedulable for those training events.
And we talked about even the flexibility within those assembly space a while. He's talking, I didn't think it was 500. I thought it was 400 like line chairs, right? That you line up, and then we're gonna have tables that have chairs. So it's similar, think the assembly room in the student center, that the flexibility of how you can rearrange things in a certain way, have, you know, divide it up if we need to. That's what we're looking at for this space as well.
Yes, go ahead, Becky.
One of you.
I had a question about the current building, and just curious if you all have a sense. I mean, I know we're like about 3 years out or so from occupying the new building. How will the campus manage current issues with the building? We know we're moving out because this building is deteriorating. We currently have a large tarp under the ceiling. So how will repairs be handled? Like, is it just continuing to manage anything that comes up? Is there sort of a wind down process of repairing the current building?
Yes, so from a facility operations and maintenance perspective is we will continue to maintain this building, and we want to make sure that it's conducive to the research and the teaching and the occupants that are here. Referencing the tarp, right? And so we're trying to find the solution for that and what that looks like. You know, you still have to live here, right, for 3 years. We aren't doing any major renovations to the current building, but yes, we're still maintaining it. You know, this building has about $33.5 million in deferred maintenance, which is also one of the reasons why we're building new versus renovating, because some of that we cannot get to without major disruptions to the operations and to the building occupants. There is not necessarily a wind down period. We don't have a date where we say, well, we're not going to change your light bulb. You know, that's not the case. We still maintain it, and even after you move in, and the individuals move in, we will still be maintaining this building because it's still an asset. And it's still, you know, our responsibility until it is sold, and that takes sometimes a long process. It has to go to the state to transfer property. So
we should continue to put in work orders.
Yes, continue to put in work orders
all the way to the end. Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Speaking of like gathering spaces and opening up the space to the community, I know there, at least in my meeting, there was conversation about having maybe a coffee kiosk or something like some of the other buildings have, that we have to always go to their buildings, and even when the Starbucks closed, we're gonna be further away. So are we talking about having something, even if it's maybe, I don't know, you know, a small business that has the opportunity to have food or coffee offered to the community and the occupants in the building, or people coming in the building?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay.
I'm joking with Paul. I mean, I've actually been asking for it. I don't know. We are looking at what are the options. We're looking at the design and what's needed as far as, you know, the sinks and the electricity and all that kind of stuff. And we're looking at putting it on the first floor where the assembly room is. And I mean, so all of those things are yes. The answer is yes.
We also have occupants in Saratoga asking for it as well. So
That's even better, because I know we'll get it there.
It's also only 1 block from Lexington Market, just to put a plug in.
And how would the decision be made about what entity would go into that space? Like, is there a way we could even connect to a nonprofit that could use it as a fundraising tool for their organization or something like that?
So currently, any food provider on our campus, many of you are familiar with the ones in School of Law or HSF2, those are managed by the Division of Student Affairs. And so I know that it is on their docket to do a food master plan for our campus. And so that any selection process would go through that. There is currently, I just saw it in the Elm, a new vendor moving into the student center, the campus center. So that is managed by the Division of Student Affairs. We're looking to provide a space and all those requirements so that it's available for that and for the campus to have that But I don't have the details right now about how we open that up and what that looks like. I do know that every time we've opened it up for a food vendor on our campus, we always look as an institution for local versus, major chain.
And with you, Joan, that I have had conversations about, depending on what we end up with, could we use it as a workforce development and partner with a nonprofit organization? So yes, so those conversations are happening. Nothing's finalized. It's going to take a little bit of time for that. But it's a conversation I've been having with the team and with the president of the university to how can we join with the community and not have to do it ourselves.
Well, and maybe that could be a trend for the rest of the vendors they're hiring, right?
Lots of hands.
Oh, so I also had a question that's kind of made me think. So right now we have a student emergency food bank and we work with the Maryland Food Bank and that's great. But I was wondering when space like that is developed, like the Maryland Food Bank has very specific requirements when we're donating food and whatnot. If we are going to be kind of, I'd like to think of food in the community, is there thought to, like, I know for community schools, we get, food pantries once a month for the community, and it was a great way to meet community members and to do cooking classes and things like that. Are we even thinking about, like, those spaces? And, there was a lot of times we couldn't do things because we didn't have the maximum size refrigerator or freezer, or the room wasn't the standard size to the Maryland Food Bank. So I'm just curious, like, yes, this is a school of social work and we want to focus on our internal community, but what about those spaces that could be used for the external community and those requirements that sometimes stop community gatherings?
We've been looking at it. I've been mentioning the food pantry and things like that, and I did not know that there were certain standards, so send them our way. And again, I think that might be some of the specialty spaces that one committee will look at, because all of those things, right now is the time to be having those conversations, right? As we think about what are the design and construction needs, including whatever kind of space or whatever kind of equipment is needed. But we are looking at that for the community as well as our internal community and our external.
I think there was a question up here.
My question was about the end. And maybe you're not there yet, but thinking about the transition move-in plan, is it that everyone is just gonna move at the same time, or is it gonna be groups? How are you thinking about the move from this building into the
It's convenient that Justin left.
Yes, I was just thinking the same thing. So that's really a School of Social Work operational decision. It's our job to deliver the project. So I defer to Judy, I guess.
Yeah, there'll be a plan, right? Groups will move. Again, we're not moving furniture, we're not moving computers. You're just moving your stuff. So I encourage all of you, 3.5 years from now, to go through your stuff and get rid of stuff, because you may or may not have the same level of space, especially if we're talking about papers or things that could be now electronically held.
Just in
So look at
Just in
Jamie.
case I have a de-hoarding expert if anybody needs it.
There you go. So, and faculty with your books, do you need five bookshelves with all these? It's a good time to start looking, and I'll be challenging everyone as we get closer to start looking at your stuff and then thinking of what you actually want to bring with you when you move to this place.
That's a good question, thank you. All right, we have lots of hands up. Go ahead.
So, I know this is a contentious, this has come up a lot, particularly thinking about the School of Social Work. Is there conversations happening at the university level about the use of prison labor to furnish our building? And will this building be furnished by prison labor? I understand that the state has a lovely rule around where they purchase furniture from, but as we think about our commitment to social justice and thinking about an opportunity to be in dialogue, is there an opportunity to address the rule before we move in, or to limit the use of prison labor to furnish and do any construction around this building?
No construction. have to worry about that.
So Judy and I met with our government affairs staff very early on in this project regarding this. And wanted to understand the history and also, the temperament of the legislature. I believe there is a current bill right now that has been proposed that could limit what we had to purchase from MCE. It hasn't passed through the legislature right now, but that is a good sign. You are right, there is a requirement to purchase furniture from Maryland Correctional Enterprises. However, if they are not able to provide what we need for the building or certain areas of the building, we can get an exemption from MCE. And so we're working together as a strategy on what that looks like and how can we maximize that exemption for certain things in the building. So we have had that discussion. I realize that that might feel not like a lot of action. However, we're looking at different ways in which we can.
And I'm gonna now pose this question to Judy as our dean. Is there a way that we as a school, a faculty and staff can be working with the government affairs to get something done before we move in? I'm sorry, but I don't know if people saw the latest report that was put out about the farms in the South and essentially the slavery condition through the prison pipeline and industrial complex. And I don't feel good as a person moving into a building knowing that those conditions. So
I totally agree, and this is why I raised it early on, saying we can't. It's just we can't, and we won't. They learn a lot about me, and when I'm like, nope, can't do that, we need, so this is one of those areas. And I think it's even things like I read in the paper that somehow there were some increases in minimum wage and things like that, except for the prisoners. And I'm going, right, so we are fully aware, administration is aware. I think that this session, no, except for this one bill that's going through, but I think that as we move forward, it is a broader issue because I think we're trying to figure out how can we focus on those exemptions and work around it, but it's a larger societal issue that as a school, we might want to be looking at, but so there's two ways, right, is what the realistic part about what we're going to do in our own building, and the larger conversation of what MCE, why is MCE even in business? Which is a whole nother question. And something that Anna and I raised with government affairs. So yes, I think bringing in students, faculty, staff to do some advocating and to get some folks on board would be definitely in line.
Does MCE products meet the LED no fossil fuel requirement that we're going for?
To an industry standard, yes.
Oh, they do? There's no fossil fuel.
Well, no, I won't say it's no fossil fuels in furniture, but when I say fossil-free building, I'm talking about the physical structure. So there's a term for when we purchase the furnishings, FF&E furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. Those are the loose things that would fall out of the building if you lifted it up upside down and shook it, which you can't do obviously, but those are the things that qualify as FF&E, and that procurement process starts later than the design process. It lags behind. We start that usually when we're beginning to do the construction documents. So that'll be coming up probably pretty soon in this spring when we'll have to initiate that process. And I'll defer to direction from leadership as to how we go about minimizing or maximizing the proportions. But currently it's state law that we have to procure from MCE.
Yes.
Oh, who's first?
That's right, you answered it. I was going to ask what furniture would start being prepared.
I just really had a question considering that we're still somewhat in a pandemic, like about the filtration, the air filtration systems in the new building. So like considering people being in and out and people obviously should not be coming to work if they're sick, but we know how that unfortunately works. What is like the filtration system? Is that going to be like a line? Like what's the plan there?
So because, as Anna mentioned, we have a high performance envelope, which if you think of that like an airplane, it's very sealed, right? Well, like in an airplane, you have to have a lot of air changes, right? Because you feel the air coming coming down on you when they pressurize the cabin. So it's not that extreme, right, because we're not flying the building. But the building is much more insulated than buildings that you've been in previously. So the ventilation system is its own dedicated system. And there's been a lot of studies across the scientific community about the quantity of air changes per hour that is safe. And they found that actually the quantity isn't as important as the cleanliness of it. So we do have filtration systems in those systems as well. So we really will have the most up-to-date and best practice for that kind of concern. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think I saw some other hands.
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, there are a couple of follow-ups, so I'm going to bring in Catherine O'Donovan, who had a sort of a more specific question about use of the meeting space. So Catherine, I'm going to open up your, allow you to talk. Please open your mic and go ahead.
Hello, Catherine O'Donovan here. Hello, everyone. So Dean Judy and team, I have this wonderful vision for the school, which is it is really our opportunity to open it up to the community. And I mean that at large, not just to our geographic community, but I see young lawyers coming into this building to hold their board meetings. I see corporate boards coming in. I see it as an excellent opportunity for us to expand our network. And Dean Judy knows that I'm always looking for our next donor also. So the ease with which they get into this building, they park, they get into this building, they're at their meeting space, they have access to kitchen facilities, and it's our opportunity to tell them all of the things that social workers do and why this school is so important. So that really sort of ease of parking, access, meeting, having an experience with someone from the school, I think is just a splendid opportunity. And I think some of this has actually been addressed, but I'm just hoping that vision will stay with the school so that we are better known. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine, and yes, we agree. I mean, I think that's part of the, I do know as far as from internally from UMB that they're, especially those who work in the Saratoga and Lexington buildings, are excited about being able to collaborate and do more and be part of. And I have said we want to be open to the community. We want community groups to be able to come in and use the space. We want, we want this to be a place, not just the surrounding community, but the larger community, as you mentioned, to be able to come in and use the assembly space and everything that goes with it. So yes, that is a plan that we have in place. And I think that as we are wrapping up, I don't know if we have enough, I don't think we have time for another question. That clock is slow, by the way. I do want to just say that one of the things that I have been impressed with as I've gone through this process with those like Anna and Mike who work with at UMB, along with President Gerald, they are truly committed to having our building be not just a building. They are committed to being the best building on campus. They're looking at it to be the best environmentally. They're looking at it to be the most interesting and most intriguing, the most open for communities and others to use. They are looking for it to be a building that stands out in a way, because I've even said this in my meetings and they can attest to it, where I'm like, part of the conversation, well, don't you want to have a building that looks like the other buildings on campus to integrate? And I'm like, no, we're the school of social work, we're different. So we're going down that path, and I have the support of the leadership to do that. They are very interested in seeing that happen as well. So I'm excited about this process. And again, all your ideas, get involved in those committees, sign up for those committees, fill out the survey, have your voice heard, because as you say things, I'm sitting here going, oh, we didn't think about that. Oh, we didn't think about that. So it's good to start these processes now, things we have thought of that you were asking about, but there's other things you haven't. So please be involved. Please have your voice heard. Please let us know so that, when we move in and you go, oh, why didn't we do this? We need those ideas now. So thank you for coming today. I appreciate the time and energy you put in to be here. For those here in the room, along with those who are joining us online, we will have more opportunities. I believe we have another town hall that's going to happen in April 23rd.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, save the date.
Save the date. So another opportunity again, and for those committees to be able to provide even more in-depth information. So thank you all.
Thank you.